Hello everyone, welcome back to Chess Comic. Today is the round 7 of the 2026 FIDE Candidates, and Javokhir's incredible streak has finally come to an end, courtesy of Anish Giri. Fun fact, the only players who managed to take points off Javokhir so far are the two draw goats, named Anish Giri and Matthias Blue Bomb. So in this round, almost every game ended in a draw, except for the game of Andrey Esipenko and Wei Yi, where the Chinese superstar secured a win. So without further ado, let's dive into the games. Of course, I want to start with the game of the sole leader, Javokhir. Actually, now he got 6 out of 7. 7. Most students probably know what does it mean. Whatever. Okay, now let's start. D4, knight of 6, C4, E6. So, I think this kind of move order is just trying to confuse white. Yeah, trying to confuse white on what black would really want to do, because this is a flexible opening or flexible start. For some reasons, black can play C5. It can be transposed to Benoni. Black can play what? D6, it can be transposed to a Queen's Indian. D5, of course, it will be transposed to the typical Queen's Gambit, right? And also, it can be a Nimzo. Now, anyway, so D5 was played, and now this is the Queen's Gambit. Decline, Rag goes in, attack. Attack. Okay. H6, tuk. This is pretty solid. I can say for both sides, right? Uh, White gives up the pair of bishops, but these knights is able to hang out because it is a semi-close game. Now, let's continue. Castle, rook c1, takes, c5. So this is all part of the line. And from what I've seen, they played what, 25 moves memorized theories, in which Anish is really uh, one of the best when it comes to that kind of this kind of thing. Knight e4 was played. Queen e7, e6. Now you may think, oh, why does white need to capture with the e pawn? Isn't this creating an isolated pawn? Why not with the knight so that the pawn structures will be healthy? That's actually true. Um, Although capturing with the e pawn gives white more space. For some reasons, the queen will have the option to go to e2. Bishop may go back to d3, knight g3, queen e4, something like this. If you capture with the knight, there'll be no idea of on this diagonal because your knight, the d file is only controlled by the knight or blocked by the knight, in which after rook to d8 it can be kicked out, right? If you want to pile up on the c file using your queen and bishop battery here, the c file is pretty much open and it's easier for the rook to attack your queen. So that's just one of the simple things I understand why e6 d4 was played. Anyhow, anyway, let's continue. Rook d8, we need 2, knight c6, rook f to d1, of course trying to protect your isolated pawn. Bishop a5. Let me just pause. I'm not going to talk about this move, bishop to a5 first, okay? I'm going to talk about the isolated pawn. We always think that, or we knew the theory of the isolated pawn that it's the weakest pawn structure. Then why are you going to get it? Why do you want to get an isolated pawn? So theories in chess are just guidelines. We use it as a guideline so we can have a much better position, or we can decide on what moves to make. But we always rely, okay, on our calculation. So, maybe I can say 9 out of 10 times we rely on our calculation, and 1% or 10% we use the theory if we don't know what to do as part of the guideline to make our decision. Enough said. Bishop a5 perhaps has the option to play bishop to b6 to put more pressure on the isolated pawn. And then let's continue. Bishop b5, bishop d7, obviously threatening c6, right? Knight c5, bishop e8. Anish is just so good here. Now, what do you do with an isolated pawn based on the theory? You push it. You want to trade it off. Anish took, takes, and now black is the one who has an isolated pawn, but it's a passer. Just to let you know, it is a passer. And let us continue. What happened to the game? Rook d to b8, takes, knight b3. Okay, here. Black is putting pressure on to the b pawn, but it's easy for white to defend it. Just need to move one of the rooks up, d2 or c2. But I think rook to d2 is much better, so that the c pawn or the c rook that controls the file will have the flexibility to move to the 7th rank or go wherever, right? And if you move here to c2, even though there's no pressure as of the moment, you don't want to get into your opponent's same color bishop, if that makes sense. a5, rook to d2 was played. Here you go. a4, knight bd4, h3, piles up, and e3. Here. The only piece, okay, that can put a trouble to this pawn is the bishop. Actually, no. Let me correct myself. So these minor pieces can attack this pawn later, or maybe it doesn't have a chance to. But these are the only pieces that can attack it, not the rook, because the knight is protecting it. And look at the knight, they're in a battery, so the rook won't be able to touch it. So here, Javokhir got the slightest advantage. Although, how do you convert? That's the toughest part, especially when you're playing against the likes of Anish. Okay, let's continue. Knight g4, h5. So I was at the live video during this part of the game when Javokhir moved this knight back. I was explaining to my stream that perhaps Javokhir was trying to look for a good rerouting spot for the knight. It can go to d3, c5, or f4, something like that, rather than moving back to h2, going back to f1 or e3 has really no future attacking the d5 pawn because it's protected. And in order for you to attack it more, you need to move the knight. And if you move the knight, the b3 pawn will be captured. So now, h takes, knight g6, f3, knight e5, king f2. This is a normal way for white to start grinding up. Use your king. Activate the king. You know, maybe I've heard this, but for me, the king is such a mysterious piece in chess. Because at the start to the middle game, or from the opening to the middle game, you want to hide your king. You want to make sure your king is safe so that it won't get mated, right? And when all the pieces have been traded off, specifically the queens, when there's less danger from hiding your king, you want to activate your king because the more active your king is in the middle or in the end game, the much higher chance to win, right? Okay, let's continue. g5, oh, I explained this. This move g5 gives up the control on f5 and h5, but it doesn't really matter because Anish has a light square bishop where he can just trade this off if a knight wants to hang out on the f5 square. So bishop d7, king g3, knight 6, rook b6, rook d2, rook c5. I think this one, Javokhir got the chance because this is a weakness. Although, even though you're able to capture this, there's always a way for black to counter because of the move bishop to e6. And now it attacks. Oopsie, what an arrow, sorry. So it attacks the b3 pawn. And for some reasons, if you capture it, the rooks have already piled up. So there's no way for you to save the b3 pawn. Okay. Rook b7, rook h2, rook d6, king f2, king g7. Here during the live stream or the live coverage of the game, rook c1 is a great idea to pile up. On the h file, at least you can play rook h8. Or for some reasons, if the king goes to g7, g6, you can go rook h7 and you have a mating threat. So I think this is a good idea though. A good maneuver that I believe Javokhir tried to calculate or maybe have seen it, but didn't really push through it. And then he played rook a5, which is the third best move by the engine. And the engine says it's a question mark, but I don't really think it's a question mark though. Rook to b4, attacking the knight. Now it's time to protect it using the king. 65. How can capturing a pawn be wrong? Same thing as the game yesterday, right? Bishop e6, and yeah, because this is hanging. Can you imagine what Anish just did, right? He traded off the rook for a knight instead of just a bishop. Because if it takes with a bishop, this is going to be a loss for black. It's going to be a forced mate in 5 by, mate in 4. Is it mate in 4? Yeah, it's a mate in 4 after knight f5 check. King goes to g6. So the king has two options to go to g6 or f7. If the king goes to f7, okay, there'll be rook h7. King goes or forced to go to, not forced, it can go to either e6 or g6, and it will be met by rook g7 or rook e7 mate. Now let's go back. Moving the king to g6 is just trying to prolong with the same idea. White checks, king goes to f7, followed by rook h7, and there'll be a mate on g7 or on e7, depending on where the king goes. Okay, so now let's go back. So rook takes b3 was played by Anish. Takes. Believe it or not, in this situation, there's an instant draw right away after bishop takes g4, because after captures, there'll be a check. And now the king is forced to play on g3 or g1 to make sure his rook is defended, and then the rook will just keep on checking back and forth. That's how the game will go. But Anish decided to play rook b2 check, trades, and this is the funny part. Black is able to create a good fortress here. So look. After this position, even though the king tries to go here, where will the king get inside? The king cannot infiltrate these squares. So let's just fast forward. After some shuffling, there's just nothing white can do. Yep. Because of this good fortress together with the bishop. And now it ended up in a draw. But not too bad for Javokhir, who still maintains 1.5 point lead to the second or next place, which is Fabiano Caruana. Now let's move on to this game. Ta-da! So Fabi was playing Prague, all right? Let's go! d4, d5, so this is a Slav. Yep. And I've seen this idea because I have played this. Yep. But I'm trying to recall if I've seen queen c7. I'm not really familiar with this queen c7. But the idea that Prague was trying to do is the same idea of f3, e4, just for the Slav. Although this move knight a6 looks, how do I say, bad. Because you're trying to move your knight to the edge. Although, there's a future for this knight because it can go to b4. And then, aside from that, black can just do a queenside casting right away to put pressure on the d file where the white queen is. But this move would be more appreciated. For me, I will appreciate this more if there is no e-pawn. Because it's easy to understand that the knight would want to control the d5 square. Right? Anyhow, let's continue. f3, typical move to control the center. Bishop e6, knight e5. Correct move. I was able to find the correct idea. Bishop e3, a5, yep. Now the knight is being anchored, right? This is an outpost. bishop c4. Here, I thought capturing is correct, but it's not. Because after capture, for some reasons, you're helping the knight to control the b6 and then tying up the queen to protect the a5 pawn. So I think Fabi played knight d7, which is to trade off the knights. I think it's a much better way to continue. Bishop takes, knight takes, castle. A fantastic move. Can I say fantastic? Or maybe I can say a fancy move played by Prague. Because the idea is to play bishop f4 after black takes the bishop. Yep, pins. Yeah, maybe we can say it's fancy, right? Takes, rook takes d4. Now I pin your knight. You gotta move your rook to a safe square, or else you're gonna be in trouble. Move the rook to d7, takes g6. Now, why didn't Fabi capture this? Because after captures, there'll be rook takes, king takes, and then rook to d1, skewered. And it will still be equal, right? Let's go back. So here Prague decided to, oh, sorry, not Prague, but where was that? Here Fabi decided to play g6 to develop his star square bishop. Knight e2. Okay, this one, the move knight e2 is preparing for a bishop trade on the longest diagonal, actually. Trade, a5, e6. Yeah, I saw this and I thought, okay, this game will end up in a draw 99, or I think that I said 95%, because there's just no way to get inside each other's territory, especially the moment the c pawns will be traded off, right? Or the b and the c pawns, I meant. So yeah, after a few shuffling, it just ended up in a draw. It's just a back and forth. So this is how the last game, all of the first half, ended for Prague and Fabi. Now let's move on to, oh boy, one of my draw goats, Matthias Bubam. Okay, I think Matthias is always well prepared when it comes to the opening. It's tough. Okay, it's tough to beat someone who will not take risk. You know what I mean? It's just playing the safest possible lines. So it just that no one takes the risk and plays the right moves, then it will end up in a draw. For Hikaru, the only thing I really feel bad about it is because he needs to win. And aside from that, I was wishing for him to play the King's Indian because, like what I always say, he is the god of King's Indian for me for this generation. Okay, let's continue. He hasn't played the King's Indian in this one. Queen's Gambit declined, that will most likely end up in a draw because both of them are trying to play something, solid and with less risk. E3, yeah, Blue Bomb just and then breaks through on E4. It's like the typical French exchange. Yeah, if you know what I mean, because I also play the French, both for white and black, and I understand the French exchange, it has a high chance or rate to draw. Now Hikaru is trying to, just try to break through the center, right? Matthias just played bishop c2 with a typical idea of queen d3 checkmate, and then okay, looking at the time, Hikaru spent 30 minutes to play bishop to d6. Probably he's trying to look for more resource to make the game more compensated, that it won't so that he won't be able to trade off pieces, right? To look more chances of winning. Rook e1 took and knight e5. I don't think it's a brilliant move, but the engine tags it's a brilliant move. Maybe it's because it's sacrificing something. Knight 6, and this one, king h1. Didn't even capture the knight yet because there's a checkmate threat. And then blue pawn played g6. Then, yep, queen takes f3. Queen h4 doesn't really hurt because it can just be defended. And here we go. After bishop to d7, with now Hikaru's down by an hour, more than an hour. Feels like, how can Hikaru win in this position? Given the fact that he's playing Blue Bomb. Well, Blue Bomb is not a bad player. Of course, he won't be at the candidates if he's a bad player, right? He's technically a very solid player. Rook f8. Yeah. Then rook a to d1, then rook a to d8. Bishop takes a7. Queen takes c4. Now, isn't this pawn... Look, let's take a look at this one. For a while, okay? So after bishop to e3 was played, or h3, isn't this pawn on c4 hanging? Why didn't Hikaru take this? So, because if Hikaru captures the pawn on c4, first there's bishop takes h6. And after the rook runs away, then there is bishop to b3. A skewer to the f7 pawn. And white just wins. So, from the entire time, Blue Bomb is not even trying to defend the c4 pawn because he always has bishop takes h6. The moment Hikaru moved the rook to e8, Blue Bomb doesn't even have to take the pawn on h6 because he has a skewer right away. Oh no, he doesn't have, because the queen is blocked. That's why he took the a7 pawn. But first here, if he's trying to threaten the bishop, Hikaru defended it, and bishop takes a7, queen takes c4, and here goes bishop to b6. Now this is another funny move because he wants the bishop to go to b6 and get away from this diagonal so that he can still play bishop to b3. Because when the bishop is on c7, black can play queen f4 to block the attack on f7, right? Okay, rook takes c1, rook takes c1, and takes, and this ended up with an opposite color bishop, right? So after a few shuffling, there's just no way. Here you may think that there's a way for white to checkmate. Nope, because the king can escape. And now since it's black's turn, black can just simply play queen f5. And with a few shuffling again of moves, where Blue Bomb is trying to put pressure on Hikaru, which is actually good, there's still no way. Hikaru finds a way to trade off pieces. Now this just ends up in a draw. How? How will this end up in a draw? Simple. By creating a fortress. For example, Blue Bomb can play pawn to b4. And then reroute this bishop to c5. And the king can just stay here, defending the pawn, or can even push the pawn to h4, move the king to f4, and then move the pawn to g3. This will not move. All white will do is move this bishop. Even though the black king is able to capture the a3 pawn, there is no breakthrough. There's nothing black can do. The bishop will just go back and forth. And it's clear. Okay, enough said. Let's move on to the game where someone won. How do I say this game? Is this the way that we've been looking for? Is this the vicious way? I think so. Let's start. e4, e5. Although Petrov, after I saw Petrov, I'm like, okay, this is another draw. Another draw. Because it's so tough to break through Petrov. Queen f2. I saw this. I actually like the preparation of Andrey here. Bishop f4, knight d3, knight c6, knight e2. I did like this for some reasons. c3 here. I saw this live. He moved the bishop to d2. I'm like, what's the plan? Why do you have to move the bishop back, right? I mean, you can just castle along. You can just simply capture. Why go back? Just to avoid a trade. But after playing bishop to d2, and Wei Yi played queen e8. A move, okay? That changed everything. So after queen e8, Wei Yi to control the game. Let's see why. King d1. What the? Oh, I remember when he played king, I'm like, what's wrong with casting? So let me show you. After casting, or the main idea of queen e8 is to pin, and aside from that, to move the queen to a4. And then after casting now, this pawn is under attack. If you play king b1, rook hangs. If you play a3, black will just sacrifice the bishop, takes, and if the king goes to c2 or b1, this one is going to be the creation of the famous Bowden's mate, the crisscrosser checkmate, knight e3, threatening the rook, threatening bishop, f5, boop, checkmate, poo, right? Okay, now let's go back. Here we go. So Andrey played king to d1. If you play king to d1, I feel like it's gonna be over, but with the right of play. With the right play, I meant. Queen a4 check, king c1, here goes Wei Yi, b5, attacking the king, right? You know, Wei Yi sacrificed a lot of pieces just for an attack before. I remember it. One of his most vicious games was when he was playing white, he sacrificed a rook, a bishop, something like that. Way far before you feel it. Anyway, knight f4 was played. As the engine says, it's a bad move, but I don't agree because it's logical to open up the knight for the bishop, right? Anyway, bishop d3 takes, bishop c2 takes, bishop d7. Logical move to develop, and also you want this bishop to be here for some reasons, right? After b4, put more pressure. Okay, now king b1, getting out of the pin. I mean, even though there's no pin, this is what you call prophylaxis. Getting out of your opponent's threat or plan ahead. And then bishop d3, rook c4. I wonder why rook c4 is bad. Why did the engine tag it as a brilliant move? Because it's sacrificing a rook, right? Because for some reasons, if white takes it, there'll be b takes c4. Now, the light square bishop is gone, in which this bishop can go here and have a feast, while the rook can attack the b file. I wonder why it wasn't tagged as a brilliant move, or maybe there's just a much better move, or maybe it's because black has a lot of good moves. Anyway, knight e2 was played. Knight e7, brilliant move, because now the rook is being sacrificed. Whew, Stockfish is just crazy, right? g4 was played. I don't find rook f6 bad from a human's perspective. b4, another brilliant move because you're giving away the rook. b3, bishop b5, takes. Wow. Now, this is just simply amazing, right? Bishop takes c4, bishop d3. So you sacrifice a rook. What is the threat? If the bishop takes, obviously, you have what? Queen takes d3 check. King goes to b2. Perhaps you have a different ways to checkmate, but you can just play queen c2 checkmate in one. Bishop c3 takes, and in this position, knight c1, because the threat is to play rook b8. Knight c1 was played, rook b8, and Andrey resigned. Why? Because after knight to b3, there will be queen a3, I guess. And then this is unstoppable. Maybe captures, but here it goes. This is just so tiring for white. Because after captures, queen takes b3, king goes, and then ta-da! Another Bowden's checkmate idea. And then if the queen blocks, checkmate. Oh, checkmate with a pawn is even nastier. Alright. So much for the games today, because we only have one winner. Let's take a look at the standings. This is the first half. There's going to be a rest day tomorrow, and then they proceed the next round after. So, out of 7 games, Javokhir got 6 points, number 1. Fabi, number 2. Clear Soul, number 2, and he's one of my picks. Anish and Prague tied for 3rd, and Prague is one of my picks. So my top 3 picks are in the top 3 of the standings, which is good. And hope Hikaru gets his first win for the next half. And okay, We know that the bottom half doesn't really have any chance, right? But you gotta admire them that they still have to show up. Yeah, that's tough. That's hard. And then for the top half, they would wish all of Yavokhir's opponents well, because because they want Yavokhir to at least lose or split a point, not keep on winning, in order for them to have contention for the title. Anyhow, anyway, again, this is Coach RJ. I'm gonna see you guys next time, and bye bye for now.